Oh, wait, gangway. They got a better. Back.
8, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19.
The title of the film is The Misfits. And misfit means you don't fit into the form, the structure of a society. So the three of those men, the Monty Clift character, the Clark Gable character, and the Guido character, each one is deviating from the norm. And they are exposed by Miller's brilliant construction. Each one has their aria of pain. And they're all explaining their pain to this woman who is in pain as well.
Nevada was an unusual part of the world as far as I was concerned. It had no relation to anything I knew about. Indeed, it was full of people who had come to get divorces or to escape something somewhere. In a way, they were free people, but they were unfree in the sense that there was an unrequited longing for something that they couldn't name.
In 1956, Arthur Miller went to Nevada to wait out a divorce. He would then be free to pursue his highly publicized liaison with Marilyn Monroe.
Mr. Miller, why did you file an application for a passport?
I wanted to go to England.
For what reason?
You guess.
We'd like you to
I wanted to be with the woman who is going to be my wife.
You mean Marilyn Monroe?
That's correct.
Do you have her in mind for any particular part? Are you going to write a play for her?
I wish I could, but I've never been able to write a play for any actress. If she fits one of the characters, she's got the job.
Miller did in fact write a part for his wife. Hoping to build her shaken confidence after she'd suffered a miscarriage, he presented her with the role of Rosalind in The Misfits, and in 1960 returned to Nevada to make the film. It was a story based on the cowboys and women he had gotten to know in the back country of Nevada. Seduced by the solitude of the West and struck by its drifters and dreamers, he wanted to tell of their custom of hunting wild mustang.
Out in the desert, you'd come across occasionally a beat-up shack, which was just four walls with maybe a window and a door flapping with the wind. But the place was covered with movie magazines, and it was quite clear that they regarded themselves as not much of anything. The real cowboys were the guys in the movies.
And the guys in the movies, Hollywood's biggest heroes and icons, would populate a film which producer Frank Taylor hoped would be the ultimate motion picture. As it turned out, the cost to each of them would be staggering.
You must have been on the phone call. I certainly wasn't in on the phone call. Arthur calling Dad to ask us up to talk to Dad or read to Dad this new script he'd just written.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And we had not met Marilyn yet, right?
Well, we hadn't met Marilyn, and we got there. And we still didn't quite meet her because she was up on the second floor vacuuming.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, she vacuumed and she vacuumed.
And Arthur was just reading this in the living room?
Frank and Arthur were reading this back and forth and back and forth.
Frank Taylor was, I think Arthur came to Frank and said, listen, would you like to produce this? I don't want the usual producers who dip their hand into it and see the commercial aspects, and that's it.
And he moved in a good way. That is, he had great taste. He was very bright. And he loved the script and the whole idea of the picture.
I mean, Dad was a very flamboyant man himself, I would say. And he wasn't your classic producer interested in the bottom line. Of course, they all love that. They could spend money willy-nilly, probably.
But they were calling him from the East every morning about the bottom line.
Yes, but I do think that the whole movie had this sense that while it was a Hollywood movie and Hollywood money, it wasn't a Hollywood movie at all.
I was 13,
I just ran errands back and forth and hung out, really. And John gets up and says, Eugene, let's go film this. Let's go shoot. And we went back up and we started filming. And from then on, it was just, he picked me up every day in his Cadillac with his chauffeur. Came by my house and picked me up.
John was one of the few people she trusted. He had been very sweet to her and very good with her in Asphalt Jungle.
Dad had known Marilyn even before Asphalt Jungle. And I feel that he was somebody who had a very clear kind of objective vision of her. He never got sucked in the way so many other men did.
He thought way back then, that she was some kind of a crazy genius. She liked him because he basically respected her ability. So when I wrote this, she wanted him to direct it and immediately sent it to him. And he agreed to do it, which I was grateful for because he was exactly the right director for this film, because he was a misfit.
Dad had immense respect for writers in general. He was very much a director who came from the literary end of things. He was really concerned at the bourgeoisification of America. And of course, Arthur Miller came from the same viewpoint, perhaps even more extreme than Dad.
In this case, he sensed that I was after something that was important to him, too, and that was the displacement in life of commitment, of people to people, of people to an ideal. And all was left to us was the moment-to-moment reality. He understood that very well, because his life was like that. He could have been Gay Langland.
You ever been outside Reno, Mrs. Tabor?
Once I walked to the edge of town. Doesn't look like there's much out there.
Everything's there.
Like what?
The country.
Well, what do you do with yourself?
Just live.
How do you just live?
Well, you start by going to sleep. You get up when you feel like it. You scratch yourself. You fry yourself some eggs. You see what kind of a day it is. You throw stones at a can. Whistle.
Well, they were in life.
I know what you mean.
Pretty much the way I had them in the film and in the story. Gay was a very capable man, I think. He could have, he was quite intelligent, quite sensitive. He drank a little, but not really too much. And he had great regard for people. But he was incapable of staying home and being a conventional father. So he'd wander all over the West. He also would bed down with some woman for 6 months.
Goodbye.
He thought they were fascinating.
Goodbye.
The casting of Gable was a problem because while he was intrigued by the script, he didn't understand it. I finally realized that since it was in the West, and these were cowboys, it wasn't turning out like a Western. So it had him mixed up as to what kind of a film this really was going to be. So I said, well, it's an Eastern Western. The preoccupation of the film is not what it usually is in a Western film. It's about people trying to connect and afraid to connect. In my mind, Rosalind is a woman who had no real relationship with men, even though she'd had a lot of relationships with men.
Well, cheer up. I will. I just hate to fight with anybody. When you win, you lose. You know, when you're hard.
Well, you're free. Maybe the trouble is you're not used to it yet.
No, the trouble is I always end up back where I started. Never had anybody much. Here I am.
It involved so much of her, what would you call it, her disappointment with people and her mistrust.
Children are supposed to bring you together.
She just no longer believed that there could be a long-term relationship that didn't disintegrate.
I've known of so-called happily married couples. One time, the wife was in the hospital to have the baby, and the husband was calling me up. I mean, he was calling me. They're still supposed to be happily married.
I guess you believe in true love, don't you?
I don't know, but...
I think there was a struggle believing in herself in a part that serious, where you didn't get off with a wisecrack, where scenes ended tragically or seriously, where her body would have meant so little in the course of the evolution of the story.
I just know you're going to take me down to that rodeo, aren't you?
Sure, you entered.
Well, I aim to be, if I can get me a ride to town. And if I can raise $10 for the entrance. But I just spent my last $2 in that phone booth. Boy, I'm real equipped, ain't I?
The younger Purse, who was Monty Clift in the movie, he was rather pathetic because he was still trying to find his place in the world. And his big thing was to become a highly professional rodeo rider. Now, you got to remember that in those days, they traveled with their horses by air. And the ambition of a guy like Purse was to be that successful. Monty wanted to do it immediately, but the insurance companies didn't want to insure him. And because he'd been in a crash and he drank, and they felt he was unreliable, and, you know, one heard all kinds of stories about his being self-destructive. But he resolved to do that picture the way it had to be done.
How do you get to know somebody, kid? I can't make a landing, and I can't get up to God either. Help me. I never said help me in my life. I don't know anybody. How do I land, honey? Will you give me a little time? Say yes. At least say hello, Guido.
Yes, Guido. Hello, Guido.
The original guy was
Hello, Rosalind.
probably the most educated of them all. He was an Italian-American and far more sophisticated, but totally unhappy with himself. His first love really was flying that airplane. And it was his life. The thing leaked oil. It needed repairs all the time. And he flew it like a little toy, in and out of the valleys, doing this ludicrous work.
Now, flying. Once I went on a glider up in New York, Corning, New York, and you sit with a pilot in the glider, and another plane pulls you up. And when you're in the air, the pilot says to me in the glider, all right, reach up and pull that ball, that red ball, pull it. And that